The SR-71 is a combination of power and majesty. When you look at it, it just has a mystique that I think is going to live for generations and generations. I wish I could take everybody up to 85,000 feet because you can see 350 miles in any direction. You can see the curvature of the earth. Mountains, 10,000 foot mountain, flat. I can say without a question is that people knew that there'd be an SR flight, and when they cranked those engines, the Buick Wildcat would scream. Then when the SR engines came on, people from around the base would just kind of stop. 117 decibels, that's what the SR was on takeoff. Six presidents used the SR-71 extensively because they had a great sense of confidence that it can in fact go out, collect the information required, and bring it back. Hundreds of missiles were fired at this airplane. I couldn't tell you how many times fighters came up to intercept me. I remember part of our missions when I was flying in the late 70s was fly through rings of SA-5s. We knew it was a very capable missile system. They weren't concerned too much about the SR, but they were very concerned about others. And they figured we could collect enough information and we could understand how that missile system would work. If we carried the nose camera, which we called the country's camera, it took a picture 72 miles wide. In 64 minutes, you would film 100,000 square miles. The film itself was 10,500 feet long, 5 inches wide. I would say my mission into the Middle East for President Carter was one of the most interesting. It was supposed to be 3 missions, but we picked up all the targets in that first mission that they needed, so that the next 2 missions were canceled. The airplane loved to fly straight and climb and accelerate. Most of the time at altitude, 80 to 85,000 feet, it was kind of like a nice Beamer or a Cadillac. But the airplane sensitivity was on a curve like this. So the faster you went, the airplane became much more sensitive and had to be handled much more delicately. The genius of this airplane was that the faster we went, it's the only airplane in the world, we burned less fuel. The greatest sonic boom that was ever set up, it was May 1972. 3 SR-71s took off from Okinawa, Japan, and simultaneously overflew Hanoi at the same time. I've talked to the POWs. They said it scared the living daylights out of the guards because they'd never heard a shock like that. It didn't sound like a bomb, and they actually fled. We called the shock waves that came across the ground the sound of freedom. Can you imagine that sometimes we were tasked to overfly foreign ceremonies, to boom heads of state when they were greeting each other, to remind them that they were doing things that were counter to U.S. policy? I was blessed in the Air Force because I was lucky to fly a number of Lockheed products. Lockheed was always there to bring in new innovation that met our needs as warfighters so we could better do our job. You know, it's a great celebration, and in 100 years has led to new vistas that who could have predicted.
November 29th, 1963. 1 week after President Kennedy's assassination, a meeting between new President Lyndon Johnson and his National Security Council was arranged. Present was Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara, a closely trusted advisor to both Kennedy and Johnson. Also at that meeting was Secretary of State Dean Rusk, Special Assistant McGeorge Bundy, and CIA Director John McCone. The issue was the secret project currently underway at Lockheed Skunk Works. The aircraft, capable of Mach 3, An elevation of 100,000 feet and a low radar cross-section began during the Eisenhower era under the code name Oxcart. Giving the U.S. a huge advantage over the Soviets in aerial reconnaissance, the project was enthusiastically supported throughout the Kennedy years. The question now was, should the administration release any information about this state-of-the-art plane to the world? McNamara favored complete disclosure to the press. If information about the A-12 was revealed, it would severely weaken the case for another Mach 3 plane also being developed, the astronomically expensive B-70 Valkyrie, a bomber that was already obsolete and high on the Secretary of Defense's chopping block. Opposing the early release was McCone and Bundy. In a shrewd calculation, it was suggested that the president instead wait until closer to his re-election the following year, realizing that the plane, with all of its technological breakthroughs, could be used as political capital. It was the plan favored by Kennedy before he died, said Bundy. Johnson, after careful consideration, decided to hold off on Oxcart, or as LBJ said, keep his powder dry. In February of 1964, however, with Senator Barry Goldwater of Arizona, a top contender for the presidency, telling the American people that both the Kennedy and Johnson administrations had failed in sponsoring any new aircraft projects, LBJ decided to fire back.
One of the best-kept secrets in military history is unveiled by President Johnson at his first General News Conference since taking office just 100 days ago. His startling announcement is that after 5 years, the U.S. has developed a jet high-altitude interceptor capable of flying long distances at 2,000 miles an hour, 3 times the speed of sound.
The United States has successfully developed an advanced experimental jet aircraft, the A-11, which has been tested in sustained flight at more than 2,000 miles an hour and at altitudes in excess of 70,000 feet. The performance of the A-11 far exceeds that of any other aircraft in the world today. The development of this aircraft has been made possible by major advances in aircraft technology of great significance for both military and commercial application. Several A-11 aircraft are now being flight tested at Edwards Air Force Base in California. The development of a supersonic commercial transport aircraft will also be greatly assisted by the lessons learned from this A-11 program. For example, one of the most important technical achievements of this project has been the mastery of the metallurgy and fabrication of titanium metal, which is required for the high temperatures experienced by aircraft traveling at more than 3 times the speed of sound. Arrangements are being made to make this and other important technical developments available under appropriate safeguards to those directly engaged in the supersonic transport program.
The result of the press conference caused the program to split into 2 different directions. The YF-12 interceptor, mistakenly called the A-11 by the president, was sent to Edwards Air Force Base as an overt program. The reconnaissance spy plane, which later became known as the world-famous SR-71, would instead remain black.
A United States Air Force Strategic Air Command weapon system. The SR-71, a highly sophisticated reconnaissance aircraft of the 60s, still ahead of the state-of-the-art in the 70s, was first announced in February 1964. The program was started initially with a systems project office given specialized management authority and answering directly to Air Force headquarters. As the program progressed, the Specialized Management Authority was transferred to the present Advanced Systems Program Office with complete administrative, engineering, and logistics responsibility. A pattern now accepted for several key Department of Defense programs. The Lockheed Advanced Development Project, nicknamed the Skunk Works since the early 40s, well known for its ability to produce in a tight security atmosphere, was selected to proceed with this highly sensitive program. A global reconnaissance system that would sustain altitudes above 80,000 feet at speeds beyond 2,000 miles per hour. With the experience gained on the YF-12 interceptor program, the task of producing the SR-71 was underway. The airframe and systems design was rapidly finalized. Engineering drawing release moved into high gear. Titanium, a light, high-temperature resistant metal, was selected to endure the torturous environment of triple sonic flight. A shop workforce, already skilled in working with titanium, was expanded as production tooling and assemblies take shape. Ship number 1 moved into final assembly. Soon another milestone is reached. Maintaining tight security and under the cover of darkness, serial number 950 leaves the assembly plant. The convoy delivering the first airplane arrives at the flight test facility. This new member of the family of Blackbirds made its debut just 22 months after go-ahead. Production aircraft scheduled for evaluation soon arrived at Edwards Flight Test Center. Almost concurrently, Lockheed and Air Force flight test efforts proved the airplane and systems. The all-important day is here. An anxiously awaited member of the team arrives on base. This first Blackbird received by the 9th Strategic Reconnaissance Wing was an SR-71B, a trainer. Enthusiastic team members are on hand to congratulate the commander and welcome the star performer. The pace quickens. Additional aircraft arrive. The new birds are on a busy flying schedule. Crews are eager to take to the skies. The SR's dagger-like shape is thrust through the sky by more power than 45 diesel locomotives. During flight, the cockpit remains comfortable, while just outside, airplane skin temperatures exceed a searing 600 degrees. The men flying this phenomenal machine soon were routinely flying Mach 3 and beyond. The team, proud of their bird and the crews that fly them, established an exclusive club. At an impressive ceremony, each crew member is awarded a Mach 3+ pin and certificate, honoring his first flight at 2,000 miles per hour. With the Blackbird came a new era of manned flight, introducing new requirements and procedures. The wing commander and his staff, ever mindful of SAC's goal, be ready on time, at any time, in any weather, finalize the details of a unique operational plan. The combined 9th Wing organizations work out procedures for putting the SR into service. The Chief of Maintenance, working closely with his flight line and shop personnel, continuously reviews and directs the progress of the team. An intimate knowledge of the mission equipment has been developed. Preparing the aircraft for flight is becoming second nature. Specialists working around the clock improve their maintenance skills. The transition to the new technology of the titanium bird is rapidly being accomplished by an enthusiastic team. VIPs, veteran pilots in command positions with a requirement to know the Blackbird, are scheduled for accelerated training. A thorough checkout in the simulator is the last phase before flight. With a 9th Wing instructor pilot, they board the aircraft. With a push forward on the throttles, they take to the air. A memorable experience, climaxed with an impressive red carpet ceremony. They too are now members of the exclusive club. The SR's 2-man crew are assigned as a team during early flight training. A picture of an SR's flight crew would be age 30 to 35, experienced in supersonic fighters, B-58s, B-52s, and high-altitude U-2s, with 2,500 to 4,000 flying hours. Proficiency milestones are rapidly being reached. Aerial refueling from a friendly tanker gives the Blackbird almost unlimited endurance. Global range training flights are now routine. Air crews working as a closely knit unit are rapidly approaching mission-ready status. Operational readiness is near, all but the final exams. To the man, the 9th Wing is ready. The inspection team arrives on base. The operational readiness inspection begins at once. During the ORI, every man, procedure, and piece of equipment is reviewed and tested. High-ranking personnel responsible for the wing deployment decision review the inspection scores. The 9th Strategic Reconnaissance Wing had passed its operational readiness inspection. A monumental leap has been accomplished. A global reconnaissance system that will sustain altitudes above 80,000 feet at speeds beyond 2,000 miles per hour, is operationally ready. The SR-71, designed and manufactured by the Lockheed Aircraft Corporation, was delivered on schedule, within budget, and has met all its performance goals. It is supported by a responsive management system. The Strategic Air Command's 9th Strategic Reconnaissance Wing has flown thousands of hours at Mach 3. They have pioneered sustained operational flight above 80,000 feet at speeds beyond 2,000 miles per hour, carrying forward the tradition of unarmed reconnaissance. Living up to their motto, peace through surveillance, by providing information for the security of the United States and the free world. The SR-71 in a single flight has flown over 15,000 miles. On one mission, it is capable of mapping a section of the world equal to a path 60 miles wide from San Francisco to New York. The incredible Blackbirds and the team that operates them are justly proud guardians of peace through surveillance.
And looking back now, I say, yeah, I knew all the time. But, that would be unfair because even though I did pretty well going through the pilot training, I always thought, I'm probably not going to make it. I'll probably wash out. There'll be some phase coming that it will be too hard and, I won't be able to grasp it all. And because it was all pretty amazing to me. This little kid from North Dakota going off to pilot training and learning how to fly jets. So,
I first met Al in 2001 when we were working together at Lockheed Martin's Skunk Works operation in Palmdale, California. At the time, I didn't know that Al was the world speed record holder in the Blackbird. I was at home one weekend researching the Blackbird to do some artwork, and I found a photo of Al taken right after their record speed run. And so I brought the book in on Monday and showed him the photo and said, "Hey, how come you didn't tell me this?" And he goes, "Well, it was just another flight." Role models to Al were people that had substance and value. They were not only his peers, but his teachers and local business owners. Al's sense of integrity came from his father. Al remembers his father as never telling a lie and not even prone to exaggeration. Al's work ethic was also strongly influenced by his father. His father owned a bakery, and Al would go into work early in the morning with his father and help bake pies before heading off to school. During the summer, when Al was a junior in high school, he had a job where he worked 6 days a week, sunrise to sunset. Saturday was a special day because they got to get off work at 6 p.m. Al's sister has always been his biggest supporter. When Al was going to college, his sister worked extra hours to help pay for his tuition. When Al was 24 years old, he was flying F-105 fighter jets in Vietnam, completing 160 combat missions. These experiences developed his leadership skills, and led to the opportunity to fly the SR-71 Blackbird.
And one of the things that I would say is everyone is good at something. I mean, everyone is.
What was unimaginable to Al as a kid, to become a pilot, was fulfilled by his willingness to dream, a strong work ethic, and unwavering integrity. It was these values that allowed Al to not only define history, but to prove to all of us that dreams can come true.
Dream. Dare to dream.
The original SR-71, from the beginning of that project to the first flight, was about 4 years. The amazing part is they did the SR-71 back in the day of slide rules and pen and paper calculations. Now with computers today, we could turn the design work much faster, and it really becomes a case more of how quick the customer says they need it. In the late 50s, when they were flying the U-2s, they were starting to recognize that the Soviet threat to those aircraft was becoming more severe, and they needed something that flew higher and faster. So it was really answering a need. Since it flew so high and so fast, the tanks got very hot, and what they discovered was conventional jet fuel was going to boil off. So they got with one of the oil companies and came up with special fuel additives, and it's a variation of jet fuel. Normal jet fuel is known as JP4. There's a special fuel called JP7. It's a little bit heavier and doesn't boil as quickly as traditional jet fuel, and it's only used for the SR-71 engine.
Of the many aircraft whose origins can be traced back to the Lockheed's renowned Skunk Works, none is more significant than the A-12. More than any other aircraft, this titanium masterpiece represented the apex of aeronautical engineering in its day, not only at Lockheed, but at every significant aerospace engineering bureau around the world. Today, over 3 decades after its first flight, it remains the aircraft by which all others are judged. Project Suntan had given Telly Johnson and the Lockheed Advanced Development Team engineers a significant opportunity to explore the attributes of hydrogen propulsion systems. Equally as important, however, Suntan also permitted the exploration of advanced airframes optimized for the first time to cruise at speeds well in excess of Mach 3. Soon after the U-2's first flight during 1955, Richard Bissell moved quickly to organize the research and development of follow-on systems, including what was to become the A-12. New studies, conducted under the codename Dusto, were initiated exploring the design and possible development of a totally new subsonic reconnaissance platform that would be designed from the start to incorporate the lowest RCS obtainable. The resulting analysis concluded that supersonic speeds, coupled with the use of radar-attenuating materials and radar-attenuating design, greatly reduced the chances of radar detection, though it did not reduce it to zero. Lockheed Aircraft Corporation and the Convair Division of General Dynamics during the fall of 1957 were to respond to a general operation requirement calling for a high-speed, high-altitude reconnaissance aircraft, but to do so without a formal contract or government funding. Johnson spent virtually every available minute working on the Advanced Aircraft Program, which he sometimes jokingly referred to as the U-3. Project Gusto was now terminated, and a new codename, Oxcart, was assigned. Ben Rich would note that the A-12 was comprised of 85% titanium and 15% composite materials. Learning to work with titanium proved to be a major undertaking. The myriad breakthroughs pioneered by Skunk Works' manufacturing team in conquering this metal were made one of the great and unheralded successes of the most incredible program. Just a great deal of work with the many problems we are trying to get this airplane built. Everywhere you turn, there is a tremendous problem requiring invention, new systems, and money, said Johnson. An official first flight, with appropriate government representatives on hand, now was made on April 30th. Nearly a year behind schedule, the aircraft became airborne for the first time. With Lou Schalk at the controls, the aircraft lifted off at 170 knots. The landing gear was retracted and climb was made to 30,000 feet. A top speed of 340 knots was reached during the flight, which lasted for 59 minutes. Following an uneventful landing, Schalk presented satisfaction with the aircraft's stability and the way it handled. On the second flight, on May 4th, the A-12 went supersonic for the first time, reaching Mach 1.1. Problems were minimal, and Johnson began to feel confident that the flight test program would progress rapidly, possibly recovering some of the time that had been lost in the drawn-out manufacturing process. The Cuban Missile Crisis now reinvigorated the program. The loss of Major Rudolph Anderson's U-2 over Cuba on October 27th underscored the increasing vulnerability of this subsonic platform when operating in denied airspace, and this was not lost on intelligence community offices involved with the overflight program. Successful execution of Oxcart now became a matter of highest national priority. At the end of 1962, two A-12s were in flight test, one powered by J-75s and the other powered by one J-75 and one J-58. A speed of Mach 2.16 and an altitude of 60,000 feet had been achieved. Flight test progress was still slow, and the engine delays and thrust deficiencies remained a major concern. Meanwhile, by the end of 1963, the CIA's A-12 flight test program had resulted in 573 flights totaling 765 hours. 9 aircraft were on hand at the test location. As noted earlier, during July, Mach 3 had been reached for the first time, and during November, design speed Mach 3.2 had been reached at an altitude of 78,000 feet. It should be noted that at this point, on July 24, 1964, President Johnson made the first official announcement concerning the forthcoming Lockheed SR-71. While the A-12 situation vacillated back and forth between an operational commitment and a continued wait-and-see, flight testing of the YF-12A had continued. During July of 1966, Johnson wrote in the log, "We were directed to give up further flying of the YF-12As. Although we had proposed shooting down a drone at Holloman to get the effect of ground clutter for low-altitude targets." The following August 5th, he wrote, "We have laid off half of our test crew of the YF-12A and are maintaining only people to store the airplane or send it to Burbank. We are very near the end of this program." As late as January 26, 1967, Johnson made the following comments in the A-12 log. "We jointly agreed there would be just one round and not two. That seems to have been a very accurate evaluation, as it seems that 30 SR-71s give us enough overflight reconnaissance capability and we don't need the additional 10 A-12 aircraft." On January 5, 1968, an official wire closing down the F-12B was received from the Air Force. The YF-12A program would be formally ended on February 1st. In a final disheartening move, the Air Force, on February 5th, sent Johnson a letter instructing Lockheed to destroy the A-12, F-12 tooling. The final A-12 flight took place on June 21, 1968, when the last remaining aircraft, number 131, was ferried from the test location to Palmville by CIA pilot Frank Murray and placed in storage. It would remain there for the following 2 decades. On June 24th, Johnson wrote, "While the intelligence community in Washington wanted very much to keep the A-12 program going, the present financial situation cannot stand the strain. It's a bleak end for a program that has been overall as successful as this." In summary, the A-12 program lasted just over 10 years from its inception during 1957 to its termination during 1968. The Skunk Works produced 15 A-12s and 3 YF-12As. 5 A-12s and 2 YF-12As were lost in accidents. 2 pilots were killed, and at least 6 had narrow escapes. In addition, 2 F-101 chase aircraft were lost with their Air Force pilots during the A-12 test program. The main objective of the program, to create a reconnaissance aircraft of unprecedented speed, range, and altitude, was triumphantly achieved. It may well be, however, that the most important aspects of the effort lay in its byproducts, the notable advances in aerodynamics, engine performance, cameras, electronic countermeasures, pilot-like support systems, and the arcane art of milling, machining, and shaping titanium. Altogether, it was a pioneering accomplishment almost certainly never to be repeated in the history of aviation. The YF-12A developed into the SR-71, and in that case, again, the cost performance was excellent as we gave back to the government well over $19 million on the contract, and we consider it to be a success. On December 6, 1962, Telly Johnson noted in his log, "Working on R-12 Universal Airplane, using company work order, can get no decision on any military version of the aircraft, but there does seem to be considerable interest in it." The Johnson's rationale for this design was based on the premise that if he produced a single platform capable of performing a reconnaissance, recon strike, or intercept role depending on customer needs, it would greatly simplify production, and it eliminates the necessity of the Air Force deciding which version they want to buy. 7 days later, the Skunk Works was visited by several SAC personnel, and Johnson logged that they wanted to see what kind of a reconnaissance version would meet SAC's needs. We prepared our proposal for a 140,000-pound reconnaissance airplane capable of carrying 4,300 pounds of reconnaissance gear and gave it to Colonel Templeton with a forwarding letter. By March 18, 1964, R-12 construction was moving along with considerable rapidity, but contract negotiations had yet to be concluded with the Air Force. Johnson noted in the log, spent several days on the first R-12s. It is extremely difficult to get a reasonable profit for what we do, and no credit is given for the fact that we operate more cheaply than others. All activity relating to the R-12 and RS-12 configurations had, of course, been kept completely under wraps in the Skunk Works and within two confines of the involved Air Force and CIA offices. On July 24, 1964, however, President Johnson made his memorable announcement revealing to the world the existence of Lockheed's Mach 3 capable reconnaissance aircraft. I would like to announce the successful development of a major new strategic manned aircraft system, which will be employed by the Strategic Air Command. This system employs the new SR-71 aircraft and provides a long-range advanced strategic reconnaissance plane for military use, capable of worldwide reconnaissance for military operations. The Joint Chiefs of Staff, when reviewing the RS-70, emphasized the importance of the strategic reconnaissance mission. The SR-71 aircraft reconnaissance system is the most advanced in the world. The aircraft will fly at more than 3 times the speed of sound. It will operate at altitudes in excess of 80,000 feet. It will use the most advanced observation equipment of all kinds in the world. The aircraft will provide the strategic forces of the United States with an outstanding long-range reconnaissance capability. In August 1964, Kelly Johnson phoned Bob Murphy and asked him if he wanted to work on the new reconnaissance aircraft. At the time, Murphy was a superintendent in charge of D-21 drone production. He accepted the offer and was immediately briefed by Johnson, who said, "I want you to go to Palmdale and get Site 2 away from Rockwell. Hire the people you need. The pieces for the aircraft will be up with you on November 1st, and I want her flying before Christmas." The SR-71 was 107 feet 5 inches long and had a wingspan of 55 feet 7 inches and a wing area of 1,605 square feet. It stood 18 feet 6 inches high to the top of the rudders, and its gross weight varied from 135,000 pounds to over 140,000. The effect of thermodynamic heating brought about by the aircraft's extreme operating envelope was a major factor affecting its construction. Fully 93% of the airframe was built from titanium, while the remaining 7% consisted of laminates of phenylsilane, silicone asbestos, and fiberglass to help produce the aircraft's RCS. The SR-71's forward fuselage has a circular cross-section and is of semi-monocoque construction. It has the pilot and a reconnaissance systems operator, RSO, seated in tandem, the front undercarriage, fuel cells, and the air refueling receptacle. The delta wing features 2 prominent engine nacelles, each mounted at mid-semi-span and blended into the wings to further reduce RCS. 2 rudders mounted on top of each nacelle and canted inboard 15 degrees from the vertical also reduce the aircraft's radial signature. A large aft-moving spike extends forward from each engine nacelle, which helped to regulate mass airflow to the 2 Pratt & Whitney J58 engines. The maximum fuel load weight for the SR-71 was 8,280 pounds. And it was carried in 6 fuel tanks. Built to cruise an afterburner at Mach 3.2 and at altitudes in excess of 80,000 feet, the aircraft encountered extremely high airframe temperatures generated by thermodynamic heating. This, coupled with the diverse operating envelope of its Pratt & Whitney J58 engines, required the development of a special fuel which served not only as a source of propulsive energy, but also as a hydraulic fluid optimized in the engine hydraulic system to activate the main and afterburner fuel nozzles. On the ground, the aircraft is only half filled with fuel and then pressurized using LN2 to 1.5 psi above ambient pressure. Shortly after takeoff, the SR-71 would rendezvous with a tanker and get topped off. The air inlet control system was a major innovation used to exponentially increase the speed performance of all Kelly Johnson's so-called Blackbirds. At Mach 1.4, the outlet doors located in the exterior of the engine nacelle began to modulate automatically in order to obtain a prearranged ratio between dynamic pressure outside the inlet throat and static duct pressure inside the inlet towel. At 30,000 feet, the inlet spikes unlock and, at Mach 1.6, began moving towards the rear, achieving their fully aft position at Mach 3.2, design cruise speed. Cruising covertly during operational missions at speeds in excess of a mile every 2 seconds, it was essential that the SR-71's navigation system was both highly accurate and non-reliant upon external navigation aids to ensure the aircraft remained on the black line. At the heart of successful missions accomplishment, therefore, was the Neutronics Astro Internal Navigation System, or ANS, designated NAS-142V2. Originally designed for the Douglas Skybolt air-to-surface ballistic missile, which was cancelled in 1963, it proved to be a perfect solution for navigating the SR-71 after a few modifications and updates. The system combined data from the internal navigation platform with a timed data accurate to within 5 milliseconds. Position updating was achieved automatically by astro-tracking at any one time 6 of the 52 most prominently visible stars by day or night, in effect using nature as a global positioning system long before GPS was developed. When the autopilot was coupled to the ANS via the AutoNav function, the SR-71 could be flown automatically, adhering precisely to a predetermined flight path that was loaded pre-flight into the ANS's computer memory. To facilitate maximum mission flexibility, the SR-71 featured 3 interchangeable nose sections housing either a high-resolution side-looking radar used for brown mapping and referred to as CAPRE, standing for Capability Reconnaissance Radar, an advanced synthetic aperture radar system, or so-called glass nose, housing a palletized optical bar camera. The SR-71 did not carry any form of defensive weaponry, save that which was generated electronically. ECM was and remains a highly sensitive area, where fast-moving technological advances meant that the SR-71's defensive electronic systems required continual updating throughout its operational life. Within the SR-71's cockpit, pressurization was allowed to fall steadily as the aircraft climbed from sea level to 8,000 feet, whereupon it remained constant to 25,000 feet. This ensured that the fuselage wasn't subjected to unduly high pressure gradients, which in turn meant that the aircraft's structural weight would be reduced. However, if pressurization was lost or the crew needed to eject, survival was dependent upon each of them wearing a full pressure suit. This requirement was enforced by Air Force Regulation 60-16, which stipulated that full pressure suits must be worn when flying above 50,000 feet. In 1977, the company developed the next generation of pressure suits. Designated the S-1030 series and featured a high level of commonality between the U-2 and SR-71 programs. Colored in old gold, the suit incorporated state-of-the-art textiles and was more durable and comfortable. Its 4 principal layers consisted of outer coverall of Nomex that was durable, care and fire resistant. The helmet, designated GN121394, was attached to the suit via a roller ball ring to enable the head to be turned. Oxygen was supplied to the crew members through holes situated around the helmet face seal. An airtight port located on the lower right side of the helmet enabled crew members to drink water of the straw to ensure they remained hydrated, and a level of sustenance was also available in the form of liquidized food dispensed from a tube. Gloves completed the pressure seal and were attached via wrist hinges. Boots featured heel retraction strips that were connected by a cable to the ejection seat on entry to the cockpit. The complete pressure suit system cost about $130,000 a copy. Crews were issued with 2 and may lasted 10 to 12 years, undergoing a complete strip-down overhaul every 5 years and a thorough inspection every 90 days or 150 hours. December 22nd, the first SR-71, with Skunkworks test pilot Bob Gillen at the controls, took to the air for the first time. Departing from Lockheed's Air Force Plant 42 Site Facility 2 at Palmdale, it remained airborne for just over an hour and reached a speed in excess of 1,000 miles an hour, which, Johnson noted, is some kind of a record for a first flight. Though the SR-71's first flight had been completed with few difficulties, ongoing flight testing of the aircraft had not been comparably problem-free. The SR-71 flight test program, conducted at Palmdale, like that of its A-12 predecessor, was not without its accidents. The first, involving the third SR-71A, occurred on January 25, 1966, when Skunkworks pilot Bill Weaver miraculously escaped without losing his ejection seat. His back sealer, Jim Zwayer, was not so lucky and was killed. At the time of the accident, the aircraft was in a right turn and then right inlet forward bypass doors were being controlled manually by Weaver. Though SR-71s finally were beginning to enter the operational Air Force inventory, the miscellaneous subsystem problems remained difficult to overcome. tank sealing, and range deficiencies continued to plague the aircraft, including those considered operational at Beale Air Force Base, and corrective action was painfully slow in overcoming them. By late 1967, all 31 SR-71s on order from Lockheed had been completed and delivered. By late September of 1969, the SR-71 was well on its way to a long, illustrious operational career. SAC already had flown well over 100 hot missions out of Tadina. NASA, for the first time, formally inquired into handling an SR-71 for test purposes on December 29, 1970. When a query was received by the Skunk Works concerning possible use of the aircraft to launch test-scale models of the forthcoming space shuttle. On July 28, 1971, Johnson noted in a log, "Nothing new on the SR-71 operation. SAC made a 10-hour flight a short time ago on which about half the time was over Mach 3 and 80,000 feet. They flew 10,000 miles." The Vietnam War had successfully justified the SR-71's existence from the time of its operational debut during 1968 through 1973. Some 600 missions had been logged during the course of Vietnam operations, and the aircraft had logged an enviable record of dependability and mission success. Temporary deployment to forward operating locations worldwide were undertaken with considerable alacrity, and during the course of its service career, the aircraft overflew almost every major political and military significant hotspot in the world, gathering intelligence data of inestimable political and military value. The previously mentioned YF-12A speed and altitude records were eclipsed by the SR-71A during a series of Federation Aeronautic International monitored flights during 1976. As of writing this, all of these records still stand, including the world's absolute speed and sustained altitude records. During the late 1980s, as major international political and economic changes began to manifest themselves throughout the world, the U.S. intelligence community began to reassess priorities and, in particular, the way it was going to spend its limited financial resources. Virtually every program, including the SR-71, was reviewed with the intent of determining its long-term viability and, in particular, its simple cost-effectiveness. As a result of this review, and in light of advances in other sensor system programs, on October 1, 1989, all SR-71 activities, with the exception of crew proficiency training and associated training flights, were suspended while the Air Force awaited release of the 1990 fiscal year budget. When revealed several weeks later, funding for the SR-71 program had been eliminated. Accordingly, all Air Force SR-71 operations were terminated officially on November 22nd.
Good evening. Recent budgetary cuts for the Air Force have ended funding for the SR-71 reconnaissance aircraft program. Local civilian and military personnel had the opportunity to view the final functional check flight of the SR-71 as it prepared to return to the United States.
Rolling down Kadeena's runway for one of the last times, the SR-71, nicknamed the Habu, performed a functional check flight in preparation for its last trip to the United States and into the pages of history. The atmosphere was charged with excitement as the flight crew, Major Jim Greenwood and Captain Steve Zaviniak, were assisted into 45 pounds of pressure suit. The physiological support technicians then conducted pressure tests on each suit and again performed these tests in the aircraft during free flight. The extra tests help ensure the suits will work in the event the pilots need to eject. The suits allow ejection at altitudes above 80,000 feet at speeds of Mach 3. After all pre-flight checks were done, the engines were started and the Habu came to life and soared into the skies of Okinawa for one of the last times. From Kadena Air Base, I'm Airman Rob Ivey.
Many of the Lockheed, Air Force, and CIA personnel who had been involved in the program during the preceding 24 years were on hand to say farewell to what many viewed as the single most significant military aircraft of the post-World War II period.
A United States Air Force Strategic Air Command weapon system. The SR-71, a highly sophisticated reconnaissance aircraft of the 60s, still ahead of the state of the art in the 70s, was first announced in February 1964. A global reconnaissance system that will sustain altitudes above 80,000 feet at speeds beyond 2,000 miles per hour is operationally ready. Deployment plans are put into effect. An overseas base is ready. Airlift is established. Equipment is transferred from a high lift to the big door on the awaiting aircraft. Personnel to man the overseas operation arrive and board for the trip. Troops soon nickname it the Habu airline. Mission aircraft deployment is initiated. An early morning takeoff, the SR will race the sun across the Pacific. After a record-breaking flight from the continental United States, the first Blackbird arrived. The overseas activity immediately prepares the aircraft to support SAC's commitment. Additional operational aircraft arrive at 24-hour intervals. A well-planned procedure is set into motion. The commander and his staff are briefed. Mission control proceeds with details and plans. Routes are selected. Weather is studied. Data cards are assembled and rushed to the processing center. Data is fed into the computer. From the output, briefing charts, route maps, and navigation tapes are generated. The data bank is searched for specific route information. Known threats are analyzed. Aircraft and sensor requirements to accomplish the mission are finalized. Composite information is assembled into a mission tape and verified. Job control through the maintenance officer receives the load sheet and schedule. Orders to the shop starts a beehive of activity. Maintenance personnel and sensor technicians, assisted by contractor specialists, prepare the aircraft and payload. Fuel is loaded. Liquid oxygen and nitrogen put on board. Sensors uploaded and aircraft pre-flighted. Countdown begin. The crew is briefed by mission planning. Latest available weather details are studied. Physiological support personnel assist the crew into their suits. A short ride to the launch shelters. PFD's men in white make the man-to-machine hookup.
The SR was flown to Mildenhall Air Base, a short distance from Farnborough, in preparation for the flight. A second flight crew, Captain Adams and Major McCorrick, were on hand to make the return flight. Suit-up of the crew by the Physiological Support Division was routine. Having been briefed on the mission and the weather en route, the pilot and RSO board for the flight to California. Following a spectacular takeoff, the aircraft made a perfect pass through the London Gate and headed west across the Atlantic and Greenland, slowing down to refuel over the Hudson Bay in Canada. The SR headed for Los Angeles. Decelerating and descending, the arrival was announced over the Los Angeles timing gate by the slight rumble of a sonic boom. A turn north brings the Blackbird home. Landing at Beale Air Force Base, the announcement was made, the setting of still another record for the Blackbird family, London to Los Angeles, a distance of 5,463 statute miles in 3 hours, 47 minutes, and 39 seconds. On hand to greet the crew was General Pitts, commander of the 15th Air Force, and Mr. Russ Daniels, Lockheed Vice President and SR-71 General Manager. The press and TV networks documented the event. The SR-71, designed a decade ago, with thousands of hours above Mach 3 to its credit, flying reconnaissance missions in the defense of the United States. The Blackbird has set a new record from New York to London and established a record London to Los Angeles. A tradition of the Blackbird family.
Aviation, the art of aeronautics, began with the dreamers, inventors, and daredevils who dared to defy gravity. The journey of aviation was nurtured by pioneers like the Wright brothers, whose first flight marked a historic milestone. The role of aircrafts in world wars was groundbreaking, dramatically changing warfare strategies. This initiated a technological evolution in aviation, transforming the simplistic wings of a biplane into the thunderous roar of jet engines. Let's journey through the ages of aviation. Behind every great aircraft, there were great minds. These visionaries, like Sir Frank Whittle, the innovator of the turbojet engine, redefined air travel. Then there's Skunk Works' Kelly Johnson, the genius behind the SR-71 Blackbird. His designs combined speed, stealth, and power, crafting machines that dominated the heavens. The contributions of these pioneers have left an indelible mark on the canvas of aviation, shaping the course of history and inspiring generations of engineers and aviators. Each epoch in aviation history gave birth to extraordinary aircrafts, each with their own unique features and roles. The Lockheed SR-71 Blackbird was a marvel of speed and stealth. The F-105 Thunderchief, a supersonic fighter bomber, was vital in the Vietnam War. The P-51 Mustang, a long-range fighter, was critical in World War II. The P-47 Thunderbolt, a heavyweight fighter, was used extensively in the same war. The A-10 Thunderbolt II, the Warthog, is a close air support icon. The Messerschmitt Me-262 marked a leap forward in aviation technology. Each of these game changers were instrumental in their eras, and their legacies still resonate today. Beyond the game changers, there are those that have transcended their practical roles to become icons. The Concorde was not just an aircraft, it was a supersonic symbol of luxury and speed. The B-52 Stratofortress, a strategic bomber, is an icon of power and resilience. These magnificent machines and others like them have become much more than just aircrafts. They are enduring icons that encapsulate the audacious spirit, the relentless innovation, and the boundless ambition that define the world of aviation. For more amazing aerial footage, and to join us in this incredible journey, check out the Dronescapes YouTube channel.
If you enjoyed this video, please remember to like and subscribe. And as always, thank you for watching.